Welcome to the Healthcare Provider Happy Hour. This is a safe space where we invite healthcare providers to unapologetically be themselves after the working day. My name is Jennifer George, and each week I will connect you with guests and stories that will help transform your stress to success and fulfillment. Are you with me? Grab your drink of choice and let's chat. Hey guys, welcome to the Healthcare Provider Happy Hour. I'm your host, Jennifer George, and I'm joining you this evening with a glass of water. I'm here to check in with you, see how you're doing. How are you managing your stress these days? One of the things that I think we can do to protect ourselves and prevent burnout is something so simple as checking in with ourselves. I want you to take a moment and think about something. Throughout your crazy day, throughout your crazy day, your hundreds of interactions with people, the decisions that you have to make that are nonstop, the patient care that you're providing and assessing, your colleague interactions, all of that. I want to ask you, throughout your day, has anyone asked you if you're okay or how you're doing? And if they do, they're a good colleague, they're a good person, and they're somebody that you probably will feel comfortable with, supported by, connected to. And that's a great thing. If you can have at least one colleague that checks in with you or checks in on you, I think you're golden. Because most of the time, we're so wrapped up in ourselves, right? And we're also so wrapped up in our patient care that we don't check in with each other. But even more importantly, I have to ask you, do you check in with yourself? Are you okay? Have you said to yourself, am I okay right now? What do I need right now? What am I feeling right now? So it's one thing to check in on others and being checked in on by others, but have you ever asked yourself how you're doing? I can probably guarantee you that you don't. And if you do, it's probably super infrequent. Because one of the things that we should be doing in order to help protect against burnout is to check in with ourselves. And we get so busy, right, with what we do every day that it's so easy to let go of things until they become a greater issue and until they amplify and become more layered and they become a greater web of conflict. And sometimes we think that either things will get better, so we don't take any action or we don't acknowledge it, right? And we just wait for things to get better. And then what ends up happening is then things often don't get better and you're suddenly blindsided by maybe an episode of burnout or extreme stress and overwhelm, anxiety, exhaustion. So I know for me, earlier on in my career, in the first 5 years of my career, I went from one toxic environment that got a little better, but it was still toxic in nature, to another environment that was even worse. And I can't help but think that back then, if I was a little more self-aware with how I was feeling and more intuitively guided by myself and not listening to others as much, if I could have prevented that. And my symptoms at the time were more depersonalization. I became very untrusting of people. I became very irritable with colleagues and peers. And I had to concentrate on trying not to be that way because I felt so lost, and I felt like people didn't understand me. They didn't understand my values. They didn't understand my purpose for practicing or how I practiced with intent or even cared to really know that. And so I felt completely lost there. And then the other part about that is I also felt like what I was doing wasn't really making a difference. Because after some time, you start to feel that way when you're feeling like people don't get you. So these are some little things. This is a post I actually did on Instagram, and you can go check it out. My handle's at bestobsessed_with_Jen. That seemed to resonate with a lot of people on how to know if burnout is creeping in on you. Because the thing with burnout, like I mentioned, is that you could wait for things to get better. You're going to keep pushing, and then all of a sudden it just blindsides you, and you suddenly feel like super exhausted, you feel depersonalized, you feel like you've lost your sense of purpose and motivation for practicing, and you start to become very cynical and negative. And obviously that's going to be out of your character, right? But by then you're burning out. So for me, it took about a year to have regained my full capacity to practice back, like mentally. Physically, I wasn't as much burned out, like I wasn't exhausted physically, but emotionally, managing that was difficult for me as well. So I hope these might help you, but these are some things that you can pay attention to in your everyday that might kind of raise a flag and be like, oh, okay, like maybe I'm not feeling great right now. And the reason why I share this is because I think there's power in self-awareness. There's power in checking in with yourself. You don't have to necessarily judge it or react to it right away, but it might just make you go, right? And then it might, for the next decision that you have to make, or the next task you have to do, or the next interaction you have, you might reflect on this a bit, right? And then you might make a better call on it that's better suited for you and your well-being. So I find by checking in, it's more empowering, and you're better able to prevent perhaps a significant episode of burnout or a medical need from happening as a result of it. So one of the first things to pay attention to is persistent rest periods that you weren't really planning for, that just keep coming up. And when you wake up, you don't feel rejuvenated by them. So you know how sometimes you go home, you take a nap, and then you feel more focused, you feel more energized after, about 20 minutes or so. But this is the type of resting where you could rest for hours and not feel rejuvenated. So you might go home, you might just plop on the couch and rest for a few hours and still not feel any better. And if this continues to happen over and over again, it might be a sign that you're heading towards some exhaustion. Second, many healthcare providers don't share their stress or their challenges very openly. And so sometimes if you are feeling overwhelmed and you are feeling stressed, you might feel alone or stuck or ashamed of those feelings. You might fear that other people are going to think that you're unfit to practice in some way, shape, or form, and that you can't handle it, or that you're inadequate or anything like that. You might fear the judgment of others, and so you might keep those feelings to yourself and start to feel more alone by how you feel. Third, it's normal to have anxiety about going to work sometimes, right? Like we get nervous, we don't know what the working day will bring, that uncertainty and everything. But if you find that every single day for a sustained period of time, you are dreading going into work, like you just absolutely dread it, you see no point to it, it's just making you feel super, super anxious, that might be a sign that you are not coping very well. Number 4, you might be starting to become more consumed and focused on things that you can't control. And I know that's where I was at in the first 5 years of my practice. I was focusing on how I thought things should be, that they weren't. And I was just basically fighting myself, right? I couldn't change the framework that I was operating in. It was bigger than me. And when you're feeling burned out, when you're feeling overly stressed, I should say, to that point, you start to become hypervigilant and focused on things that you have no real control over, and you start to lose your sense of empowerment and decision making, and you start to become more consumed by that rather than what you can control. Number 5, your investment, so your emotional investment, your physical investment in your work, starts to become like outweighing the recognition that you receive at work, right? So instead of having that balance there, you start to maybe feel like you're not feeling heard, you're not feeling understood. Maybe you're not getting any positive feedback or constructive feedback. So that might wear on you too, and you might start to feel like, well, what's the point, right? Like, am I really making an impact or having a difference? What do my employers really think of me, right? Number 6, this is a big one too, because I've seen this happen to other people. You start to feel like you can't manage your emotions. So let's say you just start crying out of nowhere and you have no reason why, like, that you can logically think of at that time. You're like, you just burst out into tears because you were so overwhelmed. Your nervous system is so heightened and overwhelmed that you just end up crying. Or maybe you snap at somebody, right? Which is so out of your character. So you start to think, like, why, what just happened there? Did I lose myself for a minute? You might want to check in with yourself on that. Number 7, you might be feeling powerless and setting boundaries. And when you feel like people don't respect your boundaries, you could be harboring resentment towards others as well, or feeling misunderstood. The thing about this too is when you're setting a boundary, sometimes we're not clear on that boundary. So we're harboring resentment for something that we didn't specify or express clearly enough, right? So you might be feeling like people aren't getting you, people aren't respecting your decisions, they're not getting it, and they're making you feel uneasy. But it might also be because you've been so stressed out that you've been unable to set that boundary for yourself, and you're starting to blur those lines a bit. So checking in with that, like, why are people not getting me lately, right? Why are my boundaries being overstepped? That could be a sign that you might be feeling pretty overwhelmed, that you can't give attention to that, or you haven't been giving attention to that. Number 8, you're starting to feel like you've lost a sense of self or purpose. You might start to feel like that's spiraling a bit, and that, again, you're just not making the impact that you once were or that you always imagined, and just something is not feeling aligned. You're questioning your livelihood. Am I meant to do this? Am I meant to be here? Is this what I signed up for? Like, you're having those types of questions, and you want to center yourself again around your purpose and why you're there to begin with. And finally, number 9, when burnout creeps in, it can also affect your personal life. You start to maybe find that you're feeling withdrawn from loved ones. You might be there, you might be with them, but you might not be really present. And you know it, and they know it. And that can make you feel pretty exhausted. It can make you feel pretty lousy about yourself, right? But if that's happening, that could be a potential sign as well, right? That you don't even have the energy or the interest to be with others socially that matter to you or who matter to you. And maybe they are pointing that out, right? With love. Maybe they're saying, you're different. There's something off about you. What I want you to understand, these are 9 things. So I hope that this makes sense for you. These are kind of some of the signs that I experienced early on in my career. And I do think that we all ebb and flow through things like these periodically. But my point here in sharing this podcast with you is the power in checking in. If you can check in with yourself periodically, as much as possible, you can prevent these from spiraling and leading to a case of burnout where you are actually on a sick leave, where you need like counseling support, medical support. Okay, so the power of checking in is like one of the greatest forms of self-care that you can give yourself. And we shouldn't be ashamed of talking about this or about feeling the way we feel, but we want to acknowledge it. Okay, we want to acknowledge it, and then by acknowledging it, we're able to better pivot and make decisions that better serve us moving forward. But we have to acknowledge it to begin with and not just suppress things, avoid things, or wait for things to get better. Okay, we have more power in the moment than we realize sometimes, and we just have to take action. Okay, and if you guys like this podcast, if you liked this episode, please take a screenshot. tag me on Instagram and share it to your IG stories. Again, my handle is at bestobsessed_with_Jen. And I just want to share with you guys that I thank you so much for you sharing your stories of burnout with me. A few of you have sent me private messages on Instagram saying that you've burned out pretty hard in your career, and some of you have even left your practice because of it. And I just want to let you know that I know this is not easy to talk about. I know it's not easy to talk about. I burned out in my career within the first 5 years, and I'm now 13 years in my practice, and I'm now talking about this, okay? Because I don't want people to go through what I went through. And if I can help one person prevent this from happening to them, that makes this podcast all the more worth it. So, like I said, if you like this podcast, share it. If you could leave a review on iTunes podcast, that would be great in moving this conversation forward with others in the healthcare space. And as usual too, just so you know, I've started my one-to-one personal coaching. If you are someone who is feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling very malaligned with your purpose, your passion in your career right now, please reach out to me on Instagram. Learn more about my one-to-one personal online coaching with you so that I can help you navigate through this, so that I can help you find the solutions, so that I can help you see the other way around this. So reach out on Instagram there. You can DM me to learn more about it, or you can go directly to the application link in my bio. I do take applications for the one-to-one personal coaching. I just want to make sure we're a good fit. That's the point of the application. But I do one-off phone calls as well. If you just have something that you want to pick my brain about, or you want to just chat about for an hour, I do those as well. And there's no application for that. So you can reach out to me on Instagram as well to arrange for that. And until we chat next time, guys, I hope you stay well. Continue to check in with yourself as often as you need, and remember to stay happy. So if you guys like this podcast, please subscribe and leave an honest review. Your feedback means everything to me. Your reviews are what moves this podcast forward, and I always appreciate receiving them. If you want to get a hold of me directly, reach out to me on social media. My handles are in the show notes, and you can always subscribe to my weekly newsletters at jennifergeorge.co so that we can stay connected. So until next time, thank you guys so much again for your ongoing support.